Isaac had always been a man who believed in love, respect, and hard work. He came from humble beginnings, and though he wasn't a wealthy man, he had built a comfortable life with his wife, Evelyn. They had been married for nearly 3 years, and while they both had decent jobs, it was far from a life of luxury. But they were happy, or so he had thought. Their troubles didn't start right away. Isaac had been aware that Evelyn's family held a certain level of expectation, especially since her siblings had married into wealth. But he had brushed it off as unimportant, thinking that love and understanding would be enough to bridge the gap. Yet, as the months went on, his in-laws' discontent became clearer, and their demands began to weigh heavily on him. At first, they started with small hints here and there, like how they would mention that they wished their daughter had a comfortable life. The suggestions turned to requests, and before Isaac knew it, his in-laws were regularly asking him for money. Initially, he tried to accommodate them and gave them what he could, for peace to reign. But every month their requests grew larger, and his attempts to meet them left him feeling emotionally and financially drained. He found himself giving out 70% of his salary to his in-laws, leaving barely enough for himself and his wife, Evelyn. He discovered that his life had become a cycle of sacrifice and obligation, and it was beginning to take a toll on his happiness. Still, he hoped that Evelyn would see his struggle and step in to relieve him. When he finally gathered the courage to speak with her about it, he was met with disappointment. Evelyn listened, but her response was not what he had expected. "I understand it's hard for you," she said, fiddling with her fingers nervously. "But they're my family, Isaac. They raised me, supported me, and, well, they have certain expectations. I don't know how to confront them about this." Isaac felt a sense of betrayal from the one person who should stand by him. He loved Evelyn, but he felt as if she was asking him to bear an impossible burden alone. She suggested he continue to provide for her family as best he could, mentioning that she could supplement their income with her own modest earnings. But it wasn't the money that bothered him. It was the principle, the lack of support from the person he had promised his life to. Years passed and the demands did not stop. Isaac found himself standing through entire family gatherings, watching as seats were reserved for important guests. His mother-in-law would often throw side comments about his financial status, with each word piercing his heart as sharp as a dagger. "Sometimes I wonder what Evelyn saw in him," she would say, not quite under her breath. "Her siblings married into wealth, and here she is, struggling to make ends meet. Such a pity." Isaac would clench his fists in anger, but he would force himself to keep his composure. He didn't want to lose his temper in front of Evelyn's family, but their words were affecting him emotionally. He was slowly losing his respect, and it wasn't what he wished for. His resentment grew with each insult and demand, but so did his sense of helplessness. He brought up the issue with Evelyn again, hoping she would see the damage it was causing. But she was caught between the loyalty to her family and the love she had for him. "Isaac, I know it's difficult, but they're my family, and they're not going to change," she said, her voice pleading. "So I'd suggest that you deal with it and accept them wholeheartedly, if you love me." "It's not about them changing," he replied. "It's about us standing together. I want you to stand with me." Isaac could see she was torn, but it hurt him that, in the end, she sided with her family. He felt his marriage slipping through his fingers, and he didn't know how to stop it. Then came the day when he reached his breaking point. It was during one of those family gatherings where once again he was told to remain standing. He could feel the heat of humiliation on his face as he stood in the corner, watching as the important people took their seats. His father-in-law threw a glance his way, one that seemed to say, "You don't belong here." And when the older man turned to another guest, speaking just loud enough for Isaac to hear, his heart sank. "We warned Evelyn about marrying a poor man," his father-in-law said with a shrug, "but she insisted. Now look where it's gotten her. It's a shame, really." Isaac clenched his jaw, his chest tight with anger and sorrow. He couldn't bear it any longer. When the evening was finally over, he pulled Evelyn aside. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I'm not a perfect man, Evelyn, but I don't deserve to be treated like this. If we're going to stay together, I need you to stand by me." Evelyn looked at him with glistening eyes with tears building up. For a moment, Isaac saw a glimmer of the woman he fell in love with, the woman who had once promised to be his partner through all of life's trials. But she shook her head, a pained expression crossing her face. "I don't know how to do that, Isaac. I don't want to lose my family." His heart broke in that moment, realizing that she had chosen her family over him, that she saw him as someone lesser, someone who didn't deserve the respect and support he had earned. Isaac didn't sleep that night. His mind raced, replaying every insult, every demand, every look of disappointment on Evelyn's face. By morning, he had made a decision. He would no longer be a prisoner to his in-laws' expectations, and he would no longer let their judgment define his worth. But something strange happened the next day. As he made up his mind to leave the house, his mother arrived from the village. A young girl carrying a bag walked behind her. Her mother had gotten them a housemaid because she wanted to prove to her in-laws that her son is capable of taking care of their daughter. She knows about the level of ridicule Isaac passes through in the hands of her in-laws, so she's going to do everything to prove them wrong. Mama introduced the girl as Rose. She told the couple that Rose is a very good girl who would run errands and help them do all the house chores. "My wife, my son may not be very wealthy, but we do know how to take care of our women. Rose will help you do anything you want." Isaac rejected Rose at first, but when his mother told him that she deliberately brought Rose to make his in-laws respect him, he asked her to stay. He changed his mind about leaving the house for his wife and they moved on with their lives. Rose was attentive, kind, and worked tirelessly, earning Isaac's gratitude. She often noticed Isaac's mood swings on difficult days and would offer comforting words. One evening, Rose found Isaac sitting alone, weighed down by burdens he rarely shared. She approached him quietly, resting a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Everything will be okay, sir," she said softly with a soothing voice. "Hardships don't last forever. You'll find happiness again." Her words lingered with him, and as the days passed, he found himself seeking her company. She listened without judgment and spoke with empathy, making him feel valued and understood. One night, unable to resist the bond that had grown between them, Isaac crossed a line and his relationship with Rose changed. He became intimate with Rose, and an affair started. After that day, their affair continued to grow stronger by the day, and with it, Isaac's fortunes began to change. Wealth seemed to flow into his life, and it all seemed to happen overnight. As his success grew, Isaac felt an odd feeling to keep Rose close, so he made her his second wife, neglecting his wife. He started believing her to be the key to his newfound prosperity. Even though his first wife was distraught, he ignored her since he's convinced that Rose was his good fortune. Little did he know that Rose was no ordinary woman. She was from the marine spirit, and her intentions were not good. With Rose as his second wife, Isaac's household took on a different atmosphere. She had a magnetic charm and quickly gained influence not only over him, but over the entire household staff. Even Evelyn, his first wife, began to feel overshadowed, gradually excluded from family decisions and stripped of authority. Rose's attitude toward Evelyn and her children grew harsher as the day goes by. She frequently demeaned Evelyn, berating her in front of their children and the servants. "Look at you, useless and weak," she would often insult the first wife. "Your husband's fortune blossomed only after I came into his life. You bring nothing but bad luck." Evelyn felt her heart breaking, but her pleas to Isaac went unheard. Under Rose's manipulation, Isaac had become cold and dismissive of Evelyn. He saw her now as a burden and a symbol of the life he had tried to leave behind. Months passed, and Rose's cruelty deepened. She would deny Evelyn's children proper food, forcing them to work around the house like servants. She limited their access to their father, positioning herself as the matriarch and enforcer of the household. Evelyn watched helplessly as her children were subjected to exhaustion and hunger, but she couldn't intervene as Rose controlled everything. When Evelyn's parents attempted to confront Isaac about Rose's behavior, tragedy struck. They were both found dead in what authorities deemed a mysterious accident. Evelyn was crushed, but Isaac seemed strangely unaffected. Though she could never prove it, Evelyn suspected Rose's involvement, a suspicion that filled her with a terrible dread. For 2 long years, Evelyn and her children endured Rose's reign of terror. Her physical and mental health began to deteriorate under the relentless abuse, and her spirit crushed. It was clear Rose intended to break her. But Rose's ambitions were more sinister than anyone suspected. Her ultimate plan involved sealing Evelyn's children into a covenant with the spirit world and enslaving them in the marine kingdom. All that is left was for Evelyn herself to be removed, as her life drained away by a strange illness that defied all medical explanation. Meanwhile, Isaac remained blind to everything happening around him, as his mind has been clouded by Rose's influence. He dismissed Evelyn's complaints as jealousy, ignoring the withering woman she had become. One night, as Isaac slept, he had a dream that shattered his world. In his dream, he was walking through a dense forest, surrounded by shadows. A blinding light broke through the darkness, illuminating the path before him. A voice, deep and filled with authority, resonated from the light. "Isaac," the voice called, echoing through the trees, "you have been led astray by powers that seek to destroy you and those you love. Return to the truth, and you will find freedom." Isaac fell to his knees in the dream, overcome by the weight of the voice's words. "Who are you? And what must I do?" he asked, his voice trembling. The light intensified, piercing through his heart, and the voice continued. "The woman in your home is not of this world. She has twisted your mind and bound you to her will. Cast her out and seek forgiveness. Only then will you restore what you have lost." Isaac woke up. He was drenched in sweat, his heart pounding. His mind was clearer than it had been in years, and as he looked around his home, he felt as if he was seeing it for the first time. The wealth and luxury that had once felt like a blessing now felt cold, hollow, and tainted. With urgency, he found Evelyn, who was frail and barely able to rise from her bed. Her eyes were hollow, her face gaunt, and Isaac felt a pang of guilt so deep it brought him to tears. "Evelyn," he whispered, taking her hand. "Forgive me. I've been blind." Evelyn looked at him, but she could barely manage a nod. Isaac made a resolve. He knew what he had to do. He confronted Rose and asked her to leave his home. Her cool face turned into a mask of rage. "You think you can cast me out?" she hissed, her eyes flashing with a strange, otherworldly light. "I own you, Isaac. I own this house. Without me, you will be nothing." But Isaac stood firm, a newfound strength fueling him. He prayed, calling upon the light from his dream. His words seemed to strike a chord, for Rose recoiled, her figure flickering as if she were a mirage. In one final piercing scream, she vanished, leaving a faint mist in her wake. The curse was broken. Isaac felt an immense weight lift from his shoulders. The air in the house seemed to brighten, and the shadows dissipated. As if waking from a nightmare, he returned to Evelyn's side, watching in awe as colour slowly returned to her cheeks. The strange illness that had gripped her began to fade, and within days she was able to walk again. The following months were a time of healing. Isaac did his best to restore his family to a sense of normalcy, though the scars from Rose's reign remained. They returned to a more modest life, letting go of the wealth that had been stained by dark influence. Gradually their household found peace, and Isaac, humbled by the trials he had endured, turned to faith, praying each day for guidance and protection over his family. Evelyn also found solace in forgiveness. Though it was difficult, she let go of the anger and resentment that had nearly destroyed their love, and in its place, she nurtured a quiet strength. One evening, as they sat together with their children, Isaac took Evelyn's hand. "I know I have failed you more than I can ever make up for," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "But I am grateful you found it in your heart to forgive me." Evelyn smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "We survived something terrible together, Isaac, but we have another chance. Let's make the most of it." From that day, Isaac and Evelyn rebuilt their life with humility and patience, holding tightly to the love that had once been nearly destroyed. They taught their children the value of faith, kindness, and resilience, and even though they never returned to their former wealth, they found something far greater: a family bound by love, courage, and a hard-won peace. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like this video before you leave.